Texas, 1872. The scorching sun was burning down on the dry prairie, red dust swirling in gusts with the wind. The endless trail led to a small town nestled in the middle of a valley. On that road, a lone cowboy rode a skinny horse. His coat was faded, his jeans were frayed, his leather shoes were cracked. His wide-brimmed hat covered half his face, revealing only deep, hard eyes filled with sadness. The townspeople soon discovered the stranger. They raised their heads from their work, their eyes scrutinizing every step of the horse. A man sitting on the steps of a saloon spat on the ground, smirking. "Another poor wretch has come." An old woman selling apples frowned. "He must be begging again." A group of children ran behind, cheering. "That guy looks like a beggar." Then they threw a few small pebbles. The horse was startled and neighed, but the cowboy only patted it gently, not reacting. The sound of a piano drifted from the saloon. The door was ajar, and a few cowboys who saw the scene burst into laughter. "He dares to dream of getting married? What a joke!" The cowboy was silent. His face did not change color, but he tightened his grip on the reins. He was used to the contemptuous looks. The town was not large. A row of dilapidated wooden houses lined the main street. A blacksmith shop, a grocery store, a small church. To the people here, any stranger who entered was immediately scrutinized. But no one had yet noticed that in the cowboy's calm eyes there was a different light, the light of will and the secret he was hiding. He stopped in front of an old inn. The wooden sign hanging high above creaked in the wind, the paint almost peeling off. The door swung open, the hinges squeaked, and at that moment, fate brought him to meet the girl. She was carrying a bucket of water. Small figure, tanned but bright face, long hair tied behind the neck. When her eyes caught the cowboy's figure, it paused longer than usual. Unlike the contemptuous crowd outside, a flash of curiosity mixed with sympathy flashed in her eyes. The cowboy walked in, his voice hoarse. "Let me rent a room, just for one night." She nodded, pointing to the wooden table. He placed down a few old coins. The coins rolled and jingled, reflecting the dull silver. The innkeeper frowned. "Old money, but still usable. Okay, one night." He nodded, saying nothing more. Leading the horse to the back barn, the cowboy tied the reins himself. The horse was panting, tired after the long journey. He patted it, his calloused hands gently as if to comfort it. Suddenly, the horse bucked, knocking over the water bucket right at the entrance. Water splashed, soaking the ground. The girl ran over, hurriedly holding the bucket, her dress dirty. But she didn't blame him, she just smiled. "Sorry," the cowboy said softly. "He's so stubborn." "It's okay," she replied, her voice as light as the wind. "You seem new to this area?" "Yeah, just passing by, looking for shelter." It was the first time their eyes met. A fleeting glance, but enough to sow a vague feeling in both of their hearts. Night fell. The town gradually quieted down. The oil lamp cast a yellow light through the wooden window. The cowboy sat on the porch, his eyes following the deserted road. Each footstep echoed in the distance, then disappeared into the darkness. The girl stepped out, her arms holding a bundle of firewood. Seeing him sitting quietly, she said softly, "You haven't slept yet?" "I'm used to staying up late," he replied, his voice low. "On the road, we have to keep the fire going every night, to guard against wild animals." She smiled, put down the bundle of firewood, and lit the fire. The flickering light clearly illuminated the cowboy's face. Still ascetic, still silent, but in those eyes, she recognized a rare experience. "Have you been to many places?" "Yes, enough to know every place has its price. Peace is never free." She was stunned for a moment. The simple words, but heavy as a stone, fell on her heart. A cold wind blew, carrying the howling of wolves from the distant hills. The cowboy slightly curled his lips, throwing more wood into the fire. "The night here is no more peaceful than anywhere else." The girl shivered, but her eyes still followed him. Part of her was curious, part of her heart was strangely stirred. Meanwhile, from afar, a few figures in town were still watching. They whispered to each other, "That boarding girl, be careful, she might be enchanted by him. He is so poor, how can he take care of anyone but himself?" The girl did not hear those whispers, but the cowboy heard them very clearly. He was silent, his eyes still on the fire, not objecting. only the hand in his pocket clenched slightly, hiding a secret that no one knew. That night passed slowly. When the girl stood up and went back to the room, she looked back at him once more. The figure sitting silently by the fire, like a figure that did not belong to this town, but could not be separated from it. In her heart, the question rang out more clearly than ever. This man, who is he? The next morning, the Texas sun slowly rose, its golden light covering the wooden roofs and the dusty main street. The small town woke up to a familiar rhythm. The clop of horses' hooves on the dry ground, the clanging of hammers from the iron shop, mixed with the cries of fruit vendors along the path. All of it blended into a noisy but familiar melody. From the old motel room, the poor cowboy stepped out. His clothes were still as shabby as the night before, but his eyes were a little brighter, as if they had been given more life. He pulled up the brim of his wide-brimmed hat, covering half his face, trying to hide himself in the bustling crowd so that no one would notice. In the backyard of the inn, the girl was kneeling by a wooden basin, scrubbing the water bucket. Her hair was down, a few strands of sweat stuck to her cheeks, but her face was still radiant. When she saw the cowboy, her lips curved into a smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle. He nodded. "Thank you for letting me help you last night." "You're a good woodcutter," she chuckled. "I've never seen a vagabond with such patience." The cowboy replied softly, his eyes distant. "Maybe, because I used to yearn for a home." The girl fell silent. A vague sympathy flashed through her heart, both surprising and confusing. That afternoon the town was hot. People gathered in the square, talking excitedly about the upcoming gunfight. For the boastful men, it was an opportunity to prove their mettle. For the outsiders, it was just a dangerous pastime. Cowboy stood at a distance, leaning against the wooden fence. His eyes followed the shouting crowd, but he had no intention of joining in. After a while, he quietly returned to the inn. In the backyard, the girl was trying to drag heavy bags of flour into the warehouse. Her forehead was covered in sweat. Her breathing was rapid. Seeing this, the cowboy approached, bent down, and lifted the bag of flour as if it were nothing. "You don't have to do that," she said quickly, holding the bag of flour and panting. "Let me do it myself," Cowboy simply said. "It's okay." He placed the bag of flour in the corner of the warehouse, his movements decisive. "I'm used to doing heavy work." The girl was momentarily stunned. Only then did she notice the sturdy figure hidden beneath his torn shirt. His hands were calloused and his muscles bulged. A thought flashed through her mind. Was he really just a poor man? The next day, it suddenly rained. The whole town was soaked. The girl was struggling to cover the goods on the porch. The cowboy appeared, pulling a large tarp to cover them. They stood together in the rain, drenched. The girl looked at him, her eyes sparkling. "You helped me so much. Why are you so kind?" The cowboy looked down, smiling slightly. "I'm not used to seeing others suffer alone." In the midst of the downpour, they both burst into laughter. It was the first time she saw his face brighten, less gloomy. That night they sat by the fire. The cowboy told a few short stories about his trips, the herds of cattle running wild, the nights sleeping outside in the bitter cold. The girl listened attentively, occasionally nodding slightly. "Have you ever thought about stopping?" she asked. "Yes," the cowboy replied, his voice deep. "But if I stop, it must be for someone worthy." Their eyes met. There was a moment of silence, longer than usual. The girl felt her heart beat faster. Rumors in town spread like wind on the prairie. Within days of the cowboy's arrival, all the stories around the fire, in the tavern, and at the market revolved around him and the girl. The whispers were not sympathetic. A woman was washing vegetables and whispering to her neighbor, "That girl is so naive. Doesn't she know he's dirt poor?" A man sitting drinking beer chimed in, "That's right. That kind of guy is only good at depending on others. Women who get involved with him will suffer all their lives." These words fell on the girl's ears. She didn't want to believe it, but her heart still sank. The whole town seemed to turn its back on them. Every step she took through the streets, she felt scrutinizing eyes, furtive whispers. However, every time she looked into the cowboy's eyes, all her doubts wavered. His eyes were deep, calm, and contained an inexplicable sincerity. They didn't look like the eyes of a liar. That was what confused her, her heart fluttering between two shores. One side was the town's prejudice, the other side was her vague feelings for him. That night, the Texas sky was strewn with stars, silver light spreading over the small town. A gentle wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of dry grass and the chirping of insects. In the inn's backyard, a fire burned brightly, spreading warmth in the quiet night. Cowboy sat by the fire, his deep eyes looking into the distance. He slowly threw in a few more logs, the flames rising to illuminate his haggard face. "What are you thinking about?" the girl asked softly, her voice as light as the wind. "About the past," he replied sadly. "The things I left behind, and the things I'm still searching for." "So what are you looking for?" She tilted her head slightly, her eyes waiting. He was silent for a long time, his hands clasped together. Finally, he spoke softly, as if afraid the wind would blow him away. "A place I can call home, and someone I can trust." Those simple words made her heart flutter. She wanted to ask more, wanted to touch the sadness in his eyes, but then hesitated. In those eyes, it was as if there was a gloomy sky silently weighing down, waiting for a ray of light to dispel it. The next day, the town was suddenly in an uproar because of the appearance of a strange man. He sat on a shiny horse-drawn carriage. His shirt was studded with a bright gold pin. His shiny black leather shoes glittered in the sunlight. He was the owner of a large ranch nearby, a man famous for his wealth and arrogance. When he saw the girl walking beside the poor cowboy, he curled his lips slightly. His voice rang out, full of confidence and disdain. "Why are you wasting your time with that ragged guy? Come with me, you will live in luxury, lacking nothing." The girl was stunned, her face flushed. She replied awkwardly, her voice choked. I am not an object for anyone to fight over." The cowboy stood silently beside him, his eyes motionless. He did not argue, only clenched his fists, his knuckles white. The rich man snorted coldly, glancing at the cowboy from head to toe. "Look at him. He's so poor. How can he support a family? You trust a guy like that?" The whole town immediately began to murmur. Scrutinizing, suspicious looks were focused on the girl. Their eyes were like invisible knives, making her choke. But the cowboy remained still, his face as hard as stone. That night, the town was quiet. The oil lamp from the inn was yellow and flickering in the night wind. The girl sat by the window, her heart in turmoil. The image of the cowboy appeared clearly, his figure hidden behind a pile of flour sacks, his calloused hands helping her cover the canvas in the rain. His distant eyes as he sat by the fire. All of it made her heart flutter. But immediately, the gossip of the villagers echoed in her mind. "He is so poor. How can he take care of anything?" She sighed, stepped out onto the porch. The cowboy was still sitting there, as quiet as usual. He did not bother to justify, did not bother to refute. His eyes were just looking into the distance, as if he was holding a story that she could not reach. The narrator's voice rang out, concluding this part. Love had just blossomed, but dark clouds had begun to gather. Doubt, prejudice, and the appearance of the rich, all were pushing them to an unpredictable turn. That afternoon, the Texas sun cast a harsh yellow over the town. Dust flew across the main road as a shiny horse-drawn carriage pulled up in front of the old inn. The wheels crunched against the dry ground. From the carriage stepped a stately man, his coat embroidered with gold thread, his leather shoes polished to a shine that reflected the sunlight. The crowd immediately stirred. It was the wealthy rancher, who was known throughout the area for his arrogance. Just by seeing him, people whispered and pointed. He slowly approached, his eyes sweeping over everyone, then stopping on the girl carrying water from the inn's backyard. His voice rang out, full of confidence and arrogance. "I told you, you don't deserve to live in such poverty. I can give you everything, fertile land, gold and silver filling the house, beautiful clothes. If you agree, you will become the happiest woman in this area." The girl paused, her hands shaking, causing the water in the bucket to spill. She took a step back, her eyes showing confusion. I am not a commodity to be traded," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He laughed, a loud, contemptuous laugh. Then he turned to look at the cowboy standing nearby, his face suddenly darkening. "And you," he lowered his voice, hissing, "a poor man dares to dream? What do you have to put on the scale? What will you feed her with, huh?" The cowboy remained still. He did not respond, nor did he react. Only his eyes silently stopped on the girl's face, his gaze slightly sad, as if to say that he did not want her to suffer more because of him. The curious crowd immediately gathered into a circle. Whispers followed one another, small but sharp as knives. "He's right, that poor man has no future. That girl who stays with him will only suffer all her life. A man who doesn't have a single piece of land or a penny in his pocket, how can he get married?" Those words hit the girl straight in the heart. She stood there, frozen, her cheeks burning. Her heart ached as if it was being pricked by hundreds of needles. She heard every word of slander, felt the contemptuous gaze directed at her. Cowboy remained silent. He made no excuses, no attempt to prove himself. His calloused hands clenched, his knuckles white, but his face remained as still as stone. The whole town was suppressing contempt for him, but he chose to remain silent. That scene was like a deep cut into the girl's heart. She felt both pity and confusion. In her heart, the question kept reverberating. Was I wrong to believe in this man? Could a poor man like everyone said could bring me any future? That evening, the wind from the prairie blew into town, bringing a dry cold. The inn was quieter than usual, only the oil lamp flickering on the wooden table. The old door creaked open, and the girl's parents entered. They were not strangers. They were familiar with many people in the town, but today their faces were different, heavy, stern. The father, a thin figure, his face worn by years of hard work, sat down in the chair opposite the cowboy. His eyes were stern, shining in the lamplight. "I'll be frank," he said firmly. "You have no land, no money. How do you plan to feed my daughter? Don't give her any more illusions." The girl was startled, her eyes wide open. Before she could say anything, her mother interrupted. Her voice was harsher and more bitter. "It would be better for her to marry that rancher. At least she would have enough to eat and warm clothes to wear. If she follows you, she will only suffer all her life. A poor person like you is not worthy." The cowboy was silent. He did not justify, did not argue. His shadow was cast on the wall, thin but strong. Under the table, his hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. His face was motionless, only his eyes were slightly sad, as if enduring all the humiliation that had piled up. The room fell into a heavy silence. The sound of the wind whistling outside the porch made the atmosphere even more stifling. Finally, the cowboy spoke, his voice hoarse as if choked in his chest. "I understand." Just 2 short words, but they seemed to contain both pain and resignation. The father nodded slightly, looking satisfied. The mother also breathed a sigh of relief, as if she had fulfilled her responsibility to protect her daughter. But the girl's heart felt like it was being torn apart. She looked at the cowboy, saw him sitting silently like a statue, his eyes not daring to look up. In her eyes, he was not a poor man, but a man embracing pride and loneliness. Tears welled up. She turned away to hide them. In her heart, a tormenting question rang out. Was she wrong to let her parents insult him? Was his silence cowardice or a deep patience for love? That night, she came to him at the stable. It was dark. Only the flickering light of the oil lamp fell on the cowboy's face. He sat with his head down, his calloused hands unconsciously stroking the horse's mane, as if seeking some comfort from the loyal animal. The girl approached, her voice trembling. "You're so poor. How can you take care of a family?" Cowboy looked up. His eyes flashed with pain like a knife. He was silent for a long time, letting the night wind blow through, then nodded slightly, his voice choked. "Maybe you're right." That admission made the girl's heart tighten. She turned away, tears falling silently onto the dusty ground. Cowboy watched her figure disappear, his hand trembling. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a sparkling gold ring. He squeezed it tightly, his lips trembling as he whispered, "If you only love me for money, then what is the meaning of that love? If you leave me because of poverty, then I don't need to hide this secret anymore." In the darkness, the ring's light reflected like a flame, shining brightly and then hidden by the ascetic hand. The next day, the atmosphere in town was completely different. If before people only whispered behind his back, now the contemptuous looks had become obvious. Every step the cowboy took seemed to be followed with ridicule. A man sitting in front of the tavern burst out laughing, shouting, "Hey, poor guy, when are you going to marry the girl? Or are you waiting for your rich father-in-law to ask for dowry money?" Laughter erupted, spreading like a dry fire on the grassland. A few housewives shook their heads in dismay. A few children ran after him, shouting, throwing merciless teasing words. The cowboy still did not respond. He walked straight silently, his shoulders slumped, but in his heart, every word was like a sharp arrow piercing deep. His heart ached, but he chose to remain silent because he was used to enduring. The girl stood far away, witnessing everything. Her heart was in turmoil, her hand unconsciously tightening her skirt. She wanted to scream, wanted to stand up to protect him, but fear, slander, and the stern gaze of her family were like invisible chains, holding her tightly, making her helplessly bow her head. That night, Cowboy sat alone in the cramped room. The room was dark, with only the faint light from the oil lamp casting his shadow on the old wooden wall. On the table, the gold ring lay quietly, its small light reflecting like a flickering flame. Cowboy reached out to take it, looked at it for a long time. His deep eyes seemed to sink into the darkness. In his heart, a fierce conflict flared up. Was he wrong, choosing to hide everything? Does true love really exist, or is it just a dream? Those questions resounded in waves, like a hammer hitting his heart. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the door, making the old curtains flutter. The roof tiles creaked, dust fell from the ceiling. The howling wind sounded like a howl from afar, signaling a great storm was quietly approaching, not only outside, but also in his heart. While the girl was drowning in tears and doubts, and the cowboy was silently gnawing at his pain, out there, fate had prepared a great event. That event would expose everything, both the secret he tried to hide and the girl's true love. The darkness is slowly swallowing the town, and then, when the darkness is deepest, the true light will be revealed. That night, the Texas sky was moonless, with only dark clouds rolling in. The whole town had fallen asleep. The wind whistling through the wooden doors seemed to signal something ominous. Suddenly, from afar, the sound of galloping horses was heard. Then shouts filled the sky. A notorious gang of robbers rushed in. Guns were fired, fires were blazed, torches were burning, the main street was lit up, smoke was billowing. People were panicking, running in all directions. Children were crying, women were screaming for help. The robbers, their faces covered, guns in hand, rushed in to loot. Cowboy was sitting in the room, listening to the commotion. He stood up, his eyes flashed. He no longer had the look of a poor man, but the look of a warrior. He rushed out. The scene before his eyes was like hell. The house was on fire, the sound of gunshots was deafening. The people hiding behind the wall were trembling. A robber pointed a gun at the girl and growled, "Stop! Your life is mine now." Without thinking, the cowboy pulled out a shiny gun from his jacket. His movements were so fast that the firelight reflected on the gun's body. "Let her go," his voice echoed. The gunshot went off. The bullet went through the robber's arm. He screamed and fell down. All eyes immediately turned to the cowboy. People were astonished. He was no longer a poor, silent man, but a skilled shooter, standing tall. He rode his horse into the middle of the robbers, shooting and shouting, "Everyone, stand up, protect the town." The men who were initially scared now woke up. They picked up their guns, hid behind wooden crates, and fired back. The whole town was in an uproar. The leader of the robbers looked at the cowboy, eyes wide with fear. He shouted, "It's him! It's him! The one who defeated us on the Rio Grande." The shout was like thunder. The people were stunned. It turned out that the poor cowboy was a famous veteran who had commanded fierce battles. And not only that, he was also the owner of a large ranch whom the bandits had hated. The girl stood still. Her heart was pounding. Every gossip and contemptuous glance in the town had disappeared. She couldn't believe that the man she had once suspected was the hero who was saving the town. The cowboy continued to fight. He controlled his horse skillfully. Each bullet he fired was accurate. The bandits, who were usually aggressive, now began to panic. They turned and ran away. The smoke and fire gradually cleared. The people looked around in amazement, then burst into cheers. They ran to the cowboy, their eyes filled with gratitude. An old man shook his hand. "My God, so you're the one who saved this whole area." The cowboy just nodded slightly. He said nothing more. His eyes stopped at the girl standing. Her eyes were filled with tears, trembling. The girl stepped forward, her voice choked. Why did you hide everything?" Cowboy looked at her, his eyes softened. He spoke, slowly but firmly. "I don't want someone to come to me just for money or fame. I need a true love, a love that looks at me for who I am, not what I possess." Those words made the girl cry. In her heart, all doubts, all hesitations disappeared. The secret is out. The despised poor man turns out to be a famous hero. But is the love between him and the girl strong enough to overcome prejudice, ambition, and fear? The answer will come at dawn tomorrow. The smoke gradually cleared. The small town, after a night of terror, still smelled of gunpowder and ashes. People were cleaning up, patching doors, picking up broken pieces. In the dim light of dawn, they whispered about the cowboy, the one who saved the town. The cowboy stood silently by the old well, his frayed coat now covered in dust and smoke, but his posture was still dignified. In his hand, the gun glistened in the early morning light. The girl slowly approached. Her eyes were filled with tears, her face tired after a long night, but in her heart was a new emotion, both regret and sobbing. "You." Her voice trembled. "Why did you choose to hide everything? Why did everyone despise you? Even I used to doubt you." The cowboy turned back, his eyes gentle, no longer as harsh as before. "Because I need to know, if anyone stays by my side, it's because of who I am, not gold or land. I want to find a true love, not obscured by wealth." The girl burst into tears, each tear falling onto the dusty ground. She stepped forward, her trembling hands tightly grasping his. "I was wrong. I let the gossip blind me, but now I understand. What I need isn't gold or silver. What I need is you." Cowboy bowed his head slightly, his hand tightening as if in oath. The townspeople who had once mocked now stood silently watching the scene. An old man spoke softly. "He not only saved us, but also taught us a lesson. Never judge a person by his appearance or his wallet." The sun gradually rose, dyeing the endless grasslands golden. Cowboy led his horse to the open field. The girl walked beside him, her steps light but sure. He turned around, revealing a rare smile, a smile that truly came from the heart. "From now on, are you willing to go with me, no matter how windy and dusty the road is, no matter how difficult tomorrow is?" The girl smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I don't need anything else, just to hold your hand." They rode together, leaving the town in the bright sunlight. True love is not measured in gold or silver, nor in fame. It is measured in sincerity. The poor man, despised by the whole town, turned out to be the richest man, rich in courage and honesty. And sometimes happiness is simply finding someone to walk with you through the red dust of the Wild West.